Hello everyone, this is Ange. In this video, I wanted to try doing my first visual novel video review. I'll be reviewing Meteor World Actor, a visual novel developed by Heliodor and officially localized in English by Shiravune. This video will be as spoiler-free as possible, and I made sure the autoplay of the visual novel in the background is only of the first 10 to 15 minutes, so there's nothing to spoil. Anyway, let's get started. The first aspect of this review I'll be talking about is the story and setting. The story revolves around police detective Ruka Hiryu, who is part of the Sideliner 13th Division of the police forces. This is a police mystery drama with some modern fantasy action, but despite some dark moments, it's actually a fairly laid-back and fun experience as a whole. The main setting is in a fictional country called the 7th Republic, which mostly consists of humans. But there are several non-human races like elves, sagots, and various others that reside in it. The setting, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting parts of the visual novel. Just about every major character is adult age, and it carries over to the general feel of the story and setting, feeling adult-like and mature as well. There are a lot of different locations the main characters will go to, much more than your typical high school setting. The way the visual novel is set up is that there's a very short prologue, followed by 4 common route chapters, 4 heroine routes, and then a very short epilogue after all the routes are completed. All 4 of the common route chapters have very interesting and different mystery stories. Ruka's fairly unique detective style makes solving the cases more fun than how an upstanding one would act. The cases might not always be 100% solved, but there is a satisfying enough conclusion to each of them that I don't have too many complaints about these. The 4 main heroine routes all have mysteries that are new or based on something built up in the common route. In addition, they do develop some of the heroines' personalities a bit, in addition to their relationship with Ruka himself. The conflicts in these routes are all interesting as well. However, one of the main issues I have with the visual novel is that all the main heroine routes are, well, the big picture conflict is always incomplete. Like, there's still development in the cases, and some conflicts are resolved, but they purposely kept the biggest enemy unresolved. Thankfully, there is a sequel confirmed to be in development by Heliodor on Twitter, but it would have been nice if the routes were just complete from the get-go. The next section I'll be talking about is the characters. The first character I'll be talking about is the main character himself, Ruka Hiryu. The 13th Division of the police force is notorious for having detectives that are difficult to work with. However, Ruka in particular sticks out because he always works by himself, does some shady things, talks very rudely and sarcastically to just about everyone, and he has a very low rate of actually catching criminals. To be honest, at first I wasn't a big fan of him because of his cocky attitude relative to his low catch rate. However, I warmed up to him a lot once he did start to show his actual competence, and you start to see some of his depth over time. He does go a bit far sometimes with his humor, but generally his extreme bluntness and lie attempts were pretty entertaining. While he's not an all-time favorite character or anything, he does get a lot of points for being a very unique and refreshing protagonist. The next character I'll be talking about is Claris. She's an elf, a rookie police detective recently assigned to the 13th Division, and becomes Ruka's partner. Claris was a fun character. She is a bit of a naive idealist, as you might expect from a newer officer, but she is not afraid to give smack to Ruka, which creates some fun interactions between them. She also has fun quirks like her being very picky with money and leaving on time for work. She's the heroine you spend the most time with, and thankfully she's likable the whole time and even has some cool powers. Next up, we have Mel. Without getting into too many spoilers, she's someone who recently arrived in the 7th Republic, and Ruka has to save her. Mel's personality is relatively reserved, but nice. Some may even call her the Yamato Nadeshiko type. She does have a tendency to be a damsel in distress, but generally I thought personality-wise she was pretty alright. She does have an interesting role, but otherwise I thought she was the least interesting of the main characters, but not bad at all. Next is Komachi. She works in the police department, but in the traffic division, so separately from Ruka and Claris. She was a decent character, generally being friendly and outgoing, but liked to have snark battles with Ruka. Her obsession with mixers leads to some funny scenes. Since she works in the traffic division, she was kind of a damsel similar to Mel, but did have a bunch of ballsy moments. She was a fine character. I'd say I liked her a tad more than Mel overall. Lastly, I'll be talking about Chiffon, who is my personal favorite girl in this visual novel. She's a very poor, petite girl who moves into the apartment room adjacent to Ruka's fairly early on. Of the main 4 girls, she's the most action-oriented by far, being one of the most powerful characters Ruka is personally associated with. But the main reason I like her a lot is she's just a weird but nice girl that has an odd way of expressing her views. She does have a kind of blunt way of talking as well, but is generally pretty friendly, and I enjoyed all the interactions she had with the other characters. I won't be covering the other characters in much detail, but I liked that there were a good amount of them that not only were voiced and had sprites, but had consistent roles and partook in the hilarious banter, and had some cool and interesting moments of their own. The next thing I want to talk about is the general presentation of the visual novel. If you're watching this video, you'll have noticed the very detailed and modern backgrounds and the user interface. The developers definitely had a particular style they were going for in terms of designing the UI, the setting, and even the music. I thought all these factors were some of the best parts of the visual novel. Just about everything was pretty to look at, and the music had a very stylish, funky sound that I enjoyed listening to. The voice acting sounded pretty good, though I'm no Japanese speaking expert, so I can't particularly comment on the acting itself. It's unfortunate the main character isn't voiced like in most eroge, but I've just gotten used to the Japanese needing to make sure they appeal to the people who look into self-inserting for stuff like H-scenes. Speaking of the H-scenes, I did enjoy them, but I do have two major things to point out about them. The first thing is that thankfully the main character doesn't do the magical multiple ejaculation thing most of the time like in most eroge. In fact, the foreplay is treated as actual foreplay before they get into the act, though with some exceptions. And of course, the main heroines will narrate everything that's happening to them, nothing new for eroge. The second thing I wanted to point out is that all of the H-scenes tend to be grouped together towards the way end of each heroine route. In a way, it could be good so they don't get in the way of the story for the most part, but if you're expecting them to be spaced out, you may be disappointed. The final thing I wanted to mention in this section is that as of this video, the only way to legally buy the official English version is through a site called Johren. Sadly, this site does not support PayPal, and if you don't have a secure Visa or MasterCard, there's a chance you could have a problem buying the visual novel. Thankfully, I personally didn't have this problem, but I did see a handful who did. I'm going to end this video with a Ange Too Long Didn't Watch list. The main positives for this visual novel are that the mysteries are very interesting, the characters and banter are fun, and the setting and overall presentation are quite good. The main negatives are that the heroine route's big picture conflicts aren't fully resolved, the main character might take getting used to at first, and the official English version can only be bought on Johren. Overall, I'd give this visual novel a solid 8 out of 10. What were you guys' opinion on my first visual novel review on this channel? Would you like to see more? Have any of you read Meteor World Actor yet? And did you like it or not? Feel free to leave thoughts of any of those questions in the comments below.